hospitality is not well seen in Australia. It's not something where you're going to see yourself in 30 years' time, you know. It's something where people are going to be like, okay, you work for hospitality during your, you know, studies just to make a bit of pocket money, etc. But ultimately, it's not going to be the type of job you're going to have when you're going to be 40 or something.
Today on Dirty Linen, I am so happy to be catching up with my old pal, Clement Demarais. I met Clement through the Attica Soup project. He's a highly qualified French restaurant manager who's been living in Australia for ages. In the thick of everything in Melbourne's second lockdown, Clement understandably scarpered out of Melbourne. And I think the last time we were in touch, Clement, you were in quarantine in Sydney before you were released into the community to get your new job. Hello.
Hey, how are you, Dani? It's so good to be with you.
Good. Same. Yeah. So, yeah, last time we were in touch, you were in quarantine, and then I just let you go along your merry way.
Yeah, look, 2020 has been like fairly crazy so far. And yeah, last time we were in touch, I was in quarantine in the CBD in Sydney. And yeah, I was just waiting to, you know, to leave and start my new job and be free from you know, free from the quarantine and yeah, and it's incredible. It's incredible. Life has been, you know, changing so much in the past couple of months, and I'm so glad as well that, you know, to hear that Melbourne is opening up as well, you know, at the moment, and very happy for you guys because I do miss Melbourne, and I miss you. I'm missing you as well.
Yeah, well, you know, we would love to have you back. But I think, you know, part of the reason that we haven't been in touch is that when people left Melbourne during that period, it sort of felt like they were going into a different world, a different
that's
reality.
that's very true.
It's been pretty intense here. And I mean, I was really happy for you to, find somebody to take on your sponsorship because you were, you know, as a sponsored worker, you were really restricted in what you could do. It was one of the things that seemed so incredibly unfair about the way that temporary visa holders were treated during the pandemic. You're so stuck. So I really celebrated your ability to work around that situation. But I think I also felt that, you know, part of the failure of what was going on was that people like yourself, really talented, highly qualified people, did see the future for themselves outside of Melbourne. And, you know, it's left Melbourne in a state now where, as restaurants are reopening and looking for staff, a lot of people just aren't here. And some of them are interstate like you are, some of them are working in other industries, and some of them have left the country. So, as much as I celebrate your path forward, I'm also kind of annoyed about it.
Yeah, I do understand now. It felt, especially over the past couple of months, is, you know, after the decision, I mean, the various decision from the government about, you know, the JobKeeper program and etc. You know, like not to include us into that part of the package. It felt like a lot of international workers and international students, short-term visa holder, like left the country as well, and went back, you know, like to Europe or, I mean, anywhere else in the world when they were able to do so. So it's true that, I mean, you know, like Melbourne is reopening, but even like in Sydney, it's pretty much the same situation in the sense that it's not very easy to find the qualified, you know, staff you are looking for to keep on going with the type of business that you are just, you know, like running on a daily basis. So yeah, I guess it's not, you know, it's good to be open. We have challenges now, and these challenges are to find the right people. Yeah, that's true.
Well, I'd love to dig into that more. But first of all, why don't you set the scene for us a little bit and tell us about what you're doing in Sydney? What is your new role?
So at the moment, my new role is I just took over a store manager position in Randwick for a French company specialized in crepes. And yeah, and so I'm sort of like you know, I just took over like a business that's been hit by, you know, the coronavirus pandemic and all the various restriction that there is in New South Wales. around hospitality, and just trying to find our way through, so that we can be able to just sustain ourselves, and keep as many people
Mm.
as possible employed too. Um,
Yeah.
hmm.
So is it a sit-down restaurant?
So it's yeah. So you do, there is like dining, online delivery as well, and then there is a variety of online things that are coming up fairly soon. So my general manager is working on that at the moment, and I know that on another store. So we have 4 stores in Sydney, and one of the store is actually providing some teaching classes, around crepes, and how to cook them, etc. And it's very interesting. And actually, there's a lot of people that are like extremely interested about that at the moment. So it's quite interesting to see the dynamic here in Sydney.
Mm. So when you left Melbourne, obviously we were just very much in the throes of the virus. It was it was pretty down. When you got to Sydney, did it feel like another situation entirely?
Oh, it was a different world, like totally different world. Like it's like, um, so when I was living in Melbourne, I used to live in St Kilda, and during the pandemic, it was everything was closed, and like nobody in the streets, very quiet, and then yeah, the weather was a bit overcasted at the time because it was still like towards it was winter towards spring. And then I arrived
Mm.
in Sydney, and then all of a sudden it's like blue sky, people in the street going to the stores, and then it's like I was shocked at the beginning because even people wearing masks, I could not see so many people wearing masks. And in Melbourne, it was like everybody was wearing masks and gloves and everything. So um, yeah, it's like I did not feel like I was still in Australia. I felt like I was somewhere else. But yeah, that's the reality here in Sydney, I guess.
And did it make you feel nervous, that people weren't paying enough attention to the pandemic?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was very stressful. Even like when you haven't been in touch with so many people for so long, being social is a bit, it's a big step, I guess.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, true.
so at the beginning, I was like, oh, like like so many people around me talking to me, etc. I was like, guys, please, like give me a bit of time because I'm not used to that anymore. Um, but yeah, it took me a couple of months, I guess, just to get back on track, and then now it's kind of like normal, I guess. But yeah, the company I'm working, for at the moment, is like very particular onto everything that is linked to the restriction, to the number of people that we can have indoor, to the social distancing, to like sanitizing everything between customers, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's good to see that. It's good to see that people are like take that seriously, and that we might avoid going back to something that we've known already.
For sure. I mean, I'm really pleased to hear that. I mean, apart from the fact that it's great to stay safe, I imagine the stress of seeing things not done properly would be, yeah, it would not, yeah, you wouldn't be able to stand it when you
Absolutely.
know how easily things can slip away and go in the wrong direction. So,
Mm.
yeah, well, I'm really glad to see that because yeah, it must have been really, really strange to be feeling, like you're emerging from a, dark, silent world of Melbourne, suddenly to be managing people and to be having to, create a situation to, to get a business up and running again. That must have been personally quite challenging, was it?
Yeah, it was. It was especially. I mean, I was not used to sort of like stay at home for so long. So
Sure.
I'll be honest with you. I think I put on 4 kilos during the pandemic. During the lockdown in Melbourne, and so it was like,
That's doing
okay.
pretty well, I think.
I was like, okay, like need to do something, need to to exercise, need to do that and go out, etc. So yeah, it's a big change, and yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's something that at the beginning we don't quite realize, and then it's quite a shock, and it's a bit stressful. But step by step, I think you have to give yourself as well some credit, because going through such a period is quite unusual. And I think if you give yourself like 1 or 2 months after things, get back to normal, if I
Mm.
can say.
Yeah, you got to be kind to yourself. I think that's certainly something in Melbourne now. I think people are realizing how much they've been impacted by what we've all gone through as you start to re-emerge and you start to think, whoa, that's a lot of people. Or, all the things that you used to do without thinking, they seem quite an effort. Like even yesterday, I got the train and the tram over to North Fitzroy, then went up to Brunswick, and I had a lovely time, eating out, going for a
Mhm.
drink. It was really, really delightful. But even things like, looking at the train timetable and trying to work out, how to get to the other side of the city. I was like,
Yeah.
it's like a very mild version of what someone might feel when they get out of jail, I guess. Or it just felt like I didn't know how to behave. And then, then I ended up getting an Uber part of the way home, and I just felt like I was desperate for some sanitizer. I just felt like nothing against the Uber, nothing against the guy. Everything was totally fine, but it just felt like, oh my god, all these human juices that must be around me. I
Yeah.
just couldn't really. Yeah, it's going to take me a while, I think.
And
Um,
I think it's gonna stay as well. I've got the feeling like you do realize that there is a distance between people. Like I don't know if you realize that, but when you are walking, in the street, and you cross someone, there is already like this 1.5 2 meter distance. Like you try to avoid coming too close to each other. And in the
yeah,
store, I've realized that with customer and even with the staff, we sort of like stand with a bit of distance, and it feels like it's gonna stay for. I mean, I might be wrong, but I feel it's gonna stay for 6 or 12 months at least.
yeah. Well, it probably should really until there's a vaccine or until
Yeah.
yeah the virus disappears like a miracle. Um, so. Tell me about the feeling of earning money again, because I think you've had such a long career in hospitality. You've done so many different things, and it's just a job where you would feel like you could always find something, and then you were in a position where that wasn't the case. Tell me how it felt to sort of climb back out of that situation.
Yeah, it's very unusual to me, to be honest, because well, I'm coming from France, obviously, and there's a lot of support and packages. It's very social. Even like at the moment when I'm talking to my friends and family, even those that are like asked to stay home, everybody's sort of like kind of covered and looked after. So to me, it was something very unusual, and I really had to dig like very deep into my savings. Um, and so, yeah, the first time I saw a pay slip coming into that after how many months is after since I think March or April, I was like, yeah, thank God, something is happening, and it's probably taken a bit of risk, like to maybe like stay for so long in Melbourne, but all those effort and like being persistent uh, is finally paying. So yeah, it feels good, and but I'm I don't know if that's a common behavior, but I get the feeling I'm sort of like saving a bit more these days, since
Mm.
after what has happened, or being a bit more careful with what I'm doing. So yeah,
Yeah, it's like you want to keep a bit of a buffer between yourself and hardship because
just in
you've
case.
seen. Yeah, yeah. I think I think that is a bit of a phenomenon, and I think I've seen studies where some of the bonuses or the government payouts that have been given to people around the world, where they think that money's going to flow through the economy. Actually, it just sits in people's bank accounts because they if they can afford not to spend the money, then they'd rather see it there just in case.
That's true.
So yeah, that seems very understandable.
That's true.
Um, yeah. So this fortnight on Dirty Linen, my topic is staffing, but of course we love talking about other things as well. But
Mhm.
let's talk about that. How are you finding it to get staff to work at the creperie?
Well, look, at the very beginning when I joined there, like obviously the activity has been reduced because of the restriction. Like instead of having, let's say, 80 people in the store, we have a restriction of like 30 at the same time. So it's like we have to divide the revenue by two, even more, even further. So there's a massive challenge there, because the cost is still the same. So like obviously, we have like a certain amount of people working at the front, at the back of house, and it's always easier to find people at the front of house. and especially when it's something like very technical, like for example a creperie, it's like well, like the company I'm working for is doing everything from scrap. We receive the wheat, we have to mill that, uh, and then after, there is all the preparation for the crepe overnight before you get the final result, in your plate. So you need to understand, the concept and the product, and sort of like have certain skills before you can even consider jumping into that, as a chef or as a cook. And that are the specific skills that are, a bit complex to find these days. um, After front of house, of course, you always have, like, difficulties to find someone to do the service and so on and so forth, but you've got like plenty of people at the moment that are looking for work too, and so it's kind of like easier to find someone for the front of house. But chefs, cooks, it's a bit more specific, I guess.
Right. So it's not as hard to find unskilled labor or people who might have lost their job in another industry and they're just like, oh, I'll give that a go. So as long as they're reasonably well presented and can learn on their feet, then you can school them up for front of house. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, it depends as well, of course, on the type of business model you have. Like we are not like a fine dining restaurant. Like
Mm.
the average ticket is not $200, like a famous restaurant in the CBD, but uh, like you have like an average, like the crepe, the product is like quite affordable. So there is like uh, families and even kids that are coming for something sweet in the afternoon, and by
Yeah.
themselves. So you don't need incredible skills to be able to take an order and then to bring that to the customer ultimately. Not as much as if you were like into a fine dining, let's say French restaurant.
Sure.
So it's, yeah, like it's kind of easier, like on the front of house. I don't mean to be
Yeah.
mean with my team, over there.
No, no. Yeah, I'm sure they're amazing, but it's just, I mean, it's a fact. It's like if you
Yes.
if you if you need particular skills to do a job, then if you don't have those skills, then that's an added cost to the business, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. So I know that at the moment, I mean, like in the past couple of months, it's been like, like you have to do with what the sort of like the environment you are evolving into. Um, but yeah, like I know that it's not easy to find those specific skills at the moment on the market.
And the people that are around that you are able to find, are they Australians or are they from overseas?
Uh, Except maybe from, like we have some kids coming for a couple of hours every now and then to give us a hand to do, let's say, the dishes, and then, early mornings they give us a hand to run some coffees, etc. But we are very limited because they can't serve alcohol because they are not 17 years old, and so on and so forth. So apart from them, the rest of the team, it's a mix of cultures. There are French people, obviously, but we've got Argentinian, we've got people from Southeast Asia, of course South America, etc., and then all over Europe. So it's quite interesting to see that we actually don't have a lot of people from a like from an Australian background.
Hmm. I mean, so you've worked all up and down the east coast of Australia, haven't you? You've worked in Queensland. You're in
Yeah,
New South Wales. You've been in Victoria.
yeah.
What's your impression of our industry from the point of view of staffing?
Uh, okay, so don't take me wrong. I think hospitality is not well seen in Australia. It's not like like the job where you're gonna jump into that and do your career, and that's something I think we talked about last time we had a
Mm.
chat on Dirty Linen. It's not
Yeah.
something where you're gonna see yourself in 30 years time. There is no. It's something where people are gonna be like, okay, you work for hospitality during your your studies just to make a bit of pocket money, etc. But ultimately, it's not gonna be the type of job you're gonna have when you're gonna be 40 or something. Um, and that's my impression here in Australia. It's not something. Of course, you get like some, like I think there's 2 or 3 good schools in Australia. But even though I'm pretty sure if you look into that, the majority of the students are from overseas. So yeah,
Yes. So do you feel like as a hospitality professional, you know, this is your career, do you feel like looked down upon by the Australian community, or do you feel like you've realized this thing, like this is a great career path, you've realized that, you know, the other people just, you know, haven't unlocked the secret that this is a great thing to do?
Um, it's a bit of a tough question. I feel like Australian in general are like very supportive of the the hospitality industry in general. Like they love to go out in the morning and go to the little cafe, or and have a seat, read the newspaper or something, and then go out for lunch and for dinner. Um, After for the rest, you know, yeah, it's a bit a tricky. I mean, it's a good question. It's a tricky one as well, and I don't want to
Well,
be
it's a real,
clever.
yeah, it's like there's a real disconnect. It's like you're right, like people love to eat out, but then they don't look favorably upon servicing the industry that they want to be there to look after them.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a bit of a relationship between those things.
So yeah, that's right. But I think you're absolutely right. There's a disconnect between like the Australian people and sometimes the decisions that are being made by their government, because I don't think anybody realized the situation the international workers were all of a sudden into until like some people sort of like stood out and spoke about the actual situation. And after that, people were like, okay, it's not normal, and this is not what we want for you, or this is not what we want for international workers that are part of our economy. So yeah,
Mm.
I think you're right. There is a disconnect between like maybe the politics and the people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and between the politics and the people and this industry that is intertwined with most people's lives.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like people don't want their kids to work in it. They don't want to work in it, but they want it to be there. So it's really fraught because if it's not valued as an industry, then it's easier to undervalue the people that are working in it, and that's I mean, it's can turn into a situation that's really a bit of a disgrace.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
It's not an easy situation. It's a bit of a catch-22 situation, because hospitality is about passion, and the passion for people as much as it is the passion for the right product, and good food and good wine, and the research all the time for what can please people ultimately,
mm,
and there is this massive international scene, whether it's in Melbourne or in Sydney, and there's this competition that is fierce. You can go out and find any kind of restaurant from all over the world, etc., etc. And I think Australia needs to be proud of that. They really need to be proud of being like it's a worldwide scene, international scene that they have, and a bit of recognition would be, yeah, little tap on the back, pat on the back, and that would
yeah.
be great every now and then. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. Like, but I think people are really proud of it. But then there's just that they're not joining the dots and saying, "Oh, well, if I'm so proud of it. If this is so much a part of who we see ourselves as. This is who we are. You know, people in this city with these great restaurants. Then and then to not want to work in them, or to not want your family to work in them, or to not give the utmost respect to the people who work in them, then it doesn't all fit together.
Mm,
It's a little bit problematic.
yeah.
But anyway, we don't need to solve the problems of the world completely in
Right
this chat.
now, okay, okay.
Not right now. We'll sort it out at some point. But Clement, I want to ask you something about crepes. When I make pancakes at home, the first one always turns out wrong. Is that the
Uh-huh.
same in a proper creperie? Does the first pancake always fail?
So, are you telling me that you are comparing a pancake and a crepe, Danny?
Uh-oh. That's my first problem.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So look, like we've got some incredible chefs, and the temperature needs to be right, and because sometimes it can get sticky otherwise, and then you need to grease, like your pan, like properly, not too much, not enough. So yeah, the first one is not always the best one, and usually I know that when they come in the store, they do like a first run on all the pans that they have, and then after that, it's ready to go.
Oh, that makes me feel better. Like it's not all on me. Okay, and I've got one more question, which is, what is it going to take to get you to come back to Melbourne?
I'm coming back on the 1st of December because the border is reopening. So I'm coming back for a few days because I'm going to go back and see my partner there. And look, I love Melbourne as much as I love, Sydney. I've got great friends in both cities, and it's fantastic. Like really, I miss, like seeing Melbourne alive. Because the last impression I had was like not a very good one. It was during the pandemic. Just to give
Oh
you an
yeah.
idea, I left my place, and usually to go to the to the airport, it takes you about half an hour through the sky bus or whatever the name is, and
Yeah.
this time it took me 15 minutes. There was nobody on the road.
Oh,
There
right.
was nobody in the airport. Everything was shut down. All the plane were on the ground, and it was an awful vision I had from Melbourne. So I really want to come back just to see me, Melbourne, alive again. And I'm coming back in December for that.
Okay, but I mean, not for a visit. I mean to work, but we can sort that out. I think maybe Melbourne needs a few new creperies, so
Yeah,
maybe you
I'm
can sort
actually,
that out.
I'm actually working on that at the moment. So I'm considering a couple of ideas, and I need to pitch that to my GM and to the director of the business, because there is one place in particular I love in Melbourne. It's the South Melbourne market, and
Yes.
I just love going there to grab a croissant or a cannelé or some prawns, or anything, even to hit the restaurant. And there's this great little cafe at the front. It's called Clement Coffee, and
Ah,
yeah, I know, and it's a good little cafe as well. So I just love going there every now and then when I get a chance. So you probably see me around there early December.
okay, good. I'll see you for a croissant. Clement, I'm really glad that you've landed on your feet. Sydney's lucky to have you. Thank you so much for coming on to Dirty Linen today to fill us in on what you've been up to, and yeah, share your thoughts on where the industry is right now. Really great to
Well,
talk.
thank you, Dani, for everything you've done. And I would not be here if it was not without your help. So I really mean it. And so thank you so much. And I can't wait to, if I've got the chance to see you in December, I'll be so happy just to have
Yes.
a chat with you, a cafe or whatever. And then, just catch up a little bit. So thank you so much for
Moi
today. And then,
aussi.
and yeah, keep up.
Yep. All right. You take care, and à bientôt.
À bientôt. Thank you.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.
Like it's the same with. Hey, it's the same.
Hang on a sec.
It's all right.
My daughter's just walking in the door. Okay, so, oh